ज्वाइन करेंगे। अच्छा ये लोग कितने वहाँ पर कितने लोग सर अंदर का रेंजर्स है सर बाकी किसी को अलाउ नहीं किया सबको मैं कितने लोग मैं ऑडियंस सर बताता हूँ। We ready? We got 2 minutes. No,
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. A very good morning to our listeners in Americas. Good afternoon to our listeners, participants in Europe and in Pakistan. And good evening to our listeners in the Far East and Australia. While welcoming you, may I request our chairman, Ikram Sagar, to welcome His Excellency, the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, for delivering his address.
Before I request His Excellency the President,
Chairman Ikram Sagar.
Before I request His Excellency the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, I would personally like to thank all the panelists who have taken off from the valuable time to be part of this absolutely important webinar, and particularly on this very solemn day. And we obviously, most of us feel the pain and anguish that the Kashmiris have been experiencing over the past year, particularly after Article 370 has been passed by the Indian Parliament and then ratified by the Indian President. And we have seen a lot of changes since then, and therefore it is very important for us to have this webinar at this stage. And therefore I am very delighted and privileged that the President of Jammu and Kashmir has joined us, and this is not the first time he has done so, and therefore I now request him to give his plenary address. Thank you, Mr. President.
हेलो, अस्सलामुअलैकुम। कोई साउंड नहीं आ रहा, ये जो मसूद खान बात कर रहे हैं। Are you aware? Are you aware कि साउंड नहीं आ रहा है?
About 20 people told me already there is no sound.
शेयर करें उससे
क्या हो गया? साउंड क्यों नहीं आ रहा?
शेयर कर लेकर
activists and also to impose a collective punishment on the entire population. In addition to that, the authorities have been violating the ceasefire line or the line of control, and they have made life hell for the people of Azad Kashmir on their side as well. Now, the activists also impose a collective punishment and Amit Shah, in addition to that, some cases are line of control, and they have life is not held for them. So I think that if you would hold the Rajnath Singh in the same and that's why you had this very sharp reaction from I think that if you would hold the Rajnath Singh in the same and that's why you had this sharp reaction.
There's a little bit of a technical problem. And while we sort it out, I'm going to request Dr. Huma Bakai to please give her speech, because I think we are, not technical people. I think we are in the hands of people who are absolutely at the moment trying to solve the issue. So, Huma, please can you help us out by carrying on live from here?
Thank you so much. I am absolutely no substitute for Sardar Masood Khan's point of view. But you see, as the valley bleeds, and it's been 1 year since last 5th August, all of us bleed with the valley. And it's not about a few thousand people. It is about 8 million people kept under a complete lockdown. There are sounds that we need to mute a few mics. Kram Sehgal Sahab, you need to mute your mic.
Yeah.
So we are talking about 8 million people who are under a virtual communication lockdown, and of one of the most militarized regions in the world. It is also now being called the largest open air prison in the world. This is the ground reality of the valley today. And as much as India would like to paint it as a real estate issue or a bilateral issue between India and Pakistan, the valley is much more. It is about human rights violations, and it is about international law violations. But perhaps even more important is the fact that the peace in South Asia is hostage to the Kashmir issue. And not just that, all the efforts that the international community are taking to initiate the peace process in Afghanistan and achieve peace on the ground in Afghanistan is also hostage to the situation between India and Pakistan, because there is no confusion about the fact that India has extended the theater of war to the western border and uses that border to destabilize Pakistan. And in fact, you see, if you hear their talk shows and some of the seminars that they are having, they actually talk about destabilizing Balochistan. They talk about destabilizing Karachi, and they give the most atrocious ways through which it could be done, where they actually talk about giving money to political parties, giving money to other entities to create unrest. So the theater of war is expanded to Afghanistan. It is used, the land is used against Pakistan, and all of this is hostage to the mindset in India that whatever is happening in Kashmir is perhaps, or how they would want the world to see, is that it is instigated by Pakistan. It is not instigated by Pakistan. It is a fenced border, something we allowed to happen in Musharraf's era. And what is happening in Kashmir is is indigenous, is entirely indigenous. And that makes it even more difficult for India to defend what is now happening in Kashmir as of right now. Because if you remember, when the 5th August lockdown was imposed, we would hear timelines like the situation would be okay in 72 hours, and then they said it's going to be okay in 2 weeks' times, and this continued for a while, and now it's been a year, and all global rights organizations have raised red flags about how the situation is on the ground. But perhaps what I want to put on the table here today in this August gathering is that Pakistan and the international community must understand that they need to move beyond showing reservations and concerns or calling for hollow mediation between Pakistan and India, because the issue is much larger than that. They need to show some teeth. They need to put some tangible measures there, perhaps even sanctions. The Europe is now talking about sanctions against Israel to curtail and contain the Modi government. You know, Arundhati Rai, and I think the Modi government is also in serious trouble. And the serious trouble is that I'm going to quote what Arundhati Rai says about Kashmir, especially the present situation. She categorically says that the Kashmiris do not need liberation from India. It's India that needs liberation from Kashmir. So that is the kind of close ally that India has sort of pushed itself into. What is allowing India to sustain this is the changing geopolitical situation in the region, which is, of course, what we are now referring to as the new Cold War. And in this new Cold War, the extra regional alliances that India has entered into, or the facilitator that India has become for extra regional powers to do the containment of China in this particular part of the world, has allowed India to carry on, and the international community or the corridors of power where they choose to turn the other way about what is happening in Kashmir, and not just in Kashmir, what is happening across India in terms of treatment of minorities. And it is not just about the treatment of minorities. I think the social fabric of the so-called one of the largest democracies of the world is torn. Indian constitutionalism is under threat, Indian secularism is under threat, and Indian democracy is crumbling under the strains of the Hindutva. What should Pakistan do? I think Pakistan has exercised a lot of strategic restraint so far. In the year 2020, up till now, over 1,700 violations of the line of control have happened, and we have not once used excessive force. We have used diplomatic channels. We continue to invoke elements of strategic restraint, soft power, and diplomatic construct to counter India. We continue to be a state which exercise what I call defensive realism. But at the same time, how can the international community forget that perhaps Pakistan, this border is called the second most dangerous border in the world? And how much provocation can Pakistan take? And until when will Pakistan not be pushed and provoked to a point where it becomes a hot war? And it suits India. We've exercised this restraint because we also realize that it suits India because it will be another diversion to from the Kashmir issue, and it will turn it into a bilateral issue. So I'm very, very pro exercising strategic restraint and defensive realism. I heard parts of what Sardar Masood said, and we said perhaps we should go offensive. My thing on the table, or my vote, is for continuing with defensive realism, giving the right kind of messages to India where it knows that there are red lines that it cannot cross, and responding and not reacting. What happened in Ladakh could have been much more severe, and China could have chosen to inflict a lot more damage on India than it chose to. The disengagement is not complete. However, the message is loud and clear. And the message is that there are Chinese red lines that India cannot cross. And the truth of the matter is that there are Pakistani red lines that India cannot cross. But at the same time, the solidarity that Pakistan has with the Kashmiri people propel us towards a more proactive stance. And there is something that Ikram Sehgal Saab actually carried a banner in the last seminar that we had, and it said, Kashmiri lives matter. And yes, Kashmiri lives matter, because what is happening in Kashmir right now is nothing less of genocide. When I speak to those people, there are around 12 young deaths every day. And when I say 12 young deaths, it means that around 12 people every day are tortured to death. The age ranges from between 9 years to 15 years, or 9 years and 27 years. They do not release dead bodies, because if they release dead bodies, there will be funerals, which will instigate more support and will sort of strengthen the Hurriyat. And then they broadcast the screams and of the people who are tortured on loudspeakers. People who are released are made to sign affidavits that they will not talk to the press. Amnesty International, BBC, and various other organizations have raised red flags about how journalists and free independent media is not allowed to go to India. Even Indian independent media is not allowed to go to the Kashmir Valley, and the journalists that go there are treated under the terrorist laws. Some of them are even picked up, interrogated, threatened, asked to leave, and of course most of them are just not allowed to go there. So what they're essentially doing in Kashmir, which is extremely dangerous, which is that it is not just genocide, they are eliminating leadership, and they've done it successively. In the first year, older people, the old school of leadership, was house arrested, and their communication with the people was disrupted. The second phase was when the Kashmiri Intifada took roots, they attacked and eliminated and shot dead completely people like Burhan Wani and others. So that the second tier of leadership, which was very active and tech-savvy, was eliminated. And now they are eliminating the prospective leadership, which means that boys as young as 9 years to 14 years are picked up and either sent out of Kashmir or held in concentration camps. I think it's a horrendous situation. And I'm also going to once again ask the international community to look into it, because Pakistan has been highlighting these issues, and perhaps we can highlight them more. But you know, what have they just done? and they do this under a garb. They create this fog. So they've created this fog around the Kashmir issue, and they sell all kind of stories to the international community. In the same way, they've created this fog around and use the COVID-19s for the political ends, to achieving political ends. So it's not just that in Kashmir, the changing of demographic law was introduced, but across India, in the name of shortening the curricula, in the name of shortening the teaching workload, they have eliminated chapters on secularism, pluralism, democracy, relations with the other countries. So all those chapters that may touch upon anything which may question what the Modi Sarkar is doing are being eliminated from the curricula. I think these are very, very dangerous trends. And these trends need to be addressed, highlighted, and curtailed. And the valley bleeds. We stand with them, but there is a lot more that needs to be done. Thank you. And I'll take questions if there are any.
Thank you for helping us out, Huma. I must apologize for this technical glitch. And, these things happen, but what can we do? But anyway, we're going to overcome it. In the meantime, I am going to request Jan Shakil. I would like to introduce Jan Shakil. Jan Shakil, after being a soldier and a good life as a soldier, he's been a diplomatic, also been our High Commissioner in Sri Lanka, where he did a remarkable job. I have a personal relationship with him. His father used to be my company commander. Most of what I am today is because of his father, both as my company commander first, and then as my commanding officer, and I was his adjutant. So I owe a lot to his father, and I must recognize that before I hand over to General Shakil. Over to you, General Shakil.
Sir, thank you very much. I'm so grateful for your remembrance of my father. It touches me deeply, sir. Thank you so much. I'll quickly get to the subject. Since last year, the environments have changed and drastically changed and will continue to remain in flux. The opportunities today must be therefore exploited. India's neighbors are clearly expressing their dissatisfaction with Big Brother. Earlier, they could not say so. India-China relations are at their lowest. BJP's policies are harming the very structure of the state. Their media establishment relationship, the relationship of media and establishment, are beginning to fail in hiding the real face of India. So these are the opportunities we're developing there. Coming militarily, the days of conventional wars are over, with which we all are accustomed and want to see in those lights, but those days are gone. And it's now morphed into a hybrid war. This is a more expensive, dangerous, invisible, and sinister war that we have entered. And most of you who don't see anything happening, don't see it because this is the nature of war that we have come into. Coming to Pakistan, there's a lot of pressure on the government to display some visible conventional, unconventional activities from our side to show our resolution to standing with the Kashmiris. Any such effort will put the Kashmir issue in the background. This is not a good option. This is not an option today. Today, we must concentrate on the people of IOK, the occupied Kashmir. That's our weak link. To keep their hope alive and deeply touch them through other means, for which some measures are in place, but we need a definite upscaling and visibility of what we do to do this a little more, a little later. I'll tell you. We are in a consistent war with India. There is a need to strengthen our state structure, which is now beginning to take the brunt of this war instead of the kinetic structure that we have. Some policy improvements, and also tell our people that there are no quick decisions coming without a very sound basis on which we start our efforts today to reach to some place. So any decisions that the people by and large are expecting are far too away. Luckily, what is on our side, the entire spectrum of leadership, government, opposition, etc., stands united on Kashmir issue. That's our strength. We need to have an ambassador at large for Kashmir as it is in Afghanistan. It will facilitate the Foreign Office. They're doing a lot of job. They have tremendous pressure. They need to be assisted and not criticized alone. In all important capital, embassies must have Kashmir cell. This thing has been repeated many times, but these are definite structural changes that must be done if you want to achieve results. Coming within Pakistan, areas within Pakistan that are critical to Kashmir's political battle must be given greater representation and attention. I leave this point here. Assembly of AJK can be turned bicameral. Its name can slightly be altered to include Gilgit-Baltistan. The senators from Gilgit-Baltistan and even diaspora of IAK can be given representation in bicameral assembly, that is in the Senate. And once we take some operations inside IOK, their demography must be respected. I can say no more on this issue also. Coming to IOK, diaspora of IOK must be supported and organized internationally for providing them forums. Some actions are visible also. IOK students who are studying abroad can be given some type of financial support, not very exhaustive sums, but just to tell them we are there. Legal community to launch cases in international courts against human rights violations in IOK being done in garb of draconian laws that they have. We could also think of some financial support within IOK to touch the common masses. It can be done selectively, but the word will go around. We have to touch the common man. It is an expensive proportion. It's very difficult to get to the right people, but it is very important in these times to touch the common man so that they remain alive to our support to them. We are fast losing it. The time has to be used. The most important thing, narrative, it has to be reversed. We don't have to spend now on an armored division. We must spend that kind of money on our narrative. But being a soldier, I may say something which people may not like. No narrative works without an armored division backing it also. So we need to reverse our armored division and continue to maintain our force structure to give the due credibility. How to reverse this narrative? There are so many things can be taught, can be said, being tried. Just one small little indicator. The stationing of forces of India and Pakistan were allowed temporarily by the UN resolution. These forces allowed in AJK and IOK were both temporary, and therefore their rights are different from normal forces who are deployed in a country. Now the Indian temporarily employed forces are conducting human rights violations. It is open to being taken to international court. Legal advisors there, they talked enough on it, and there are so many other things that one can bring to the fore to take Indians to the courts, to international court, and third party can also take them to court. The IOK people can be taken out and taken to the court. So much can be done on this and has been talked about. Let me say, if we give them space, the resistance within give them space, the resistance inside IOK will get more solid footing, and the resistance has eventually to come from within. It has eventually come from within, and people of AJK and Gilgit-Baltistan historically have fought, and they've been fighting for years. They can do it well on their own ground. The next issue is we must use this opportunity to enhance our relation with the neighbors of India. It's a compulsion of these countries, these neighbors of India, to better their relations with China in comparison with India. This is a reality. It is unfolding. And what will be its military effect? This struggle will eventually result in enhanced deployment of Indian Army on the borders of each of these countries. We have a role to play that, and we should ensure that this happens, and we can do it, and this has happened before also. Thus, the full might of Indian Army, which always is brought on its western front, will be curtailed. To this end, it's time to employ special envoys to these countries so that they can closely exploit available opportunities and have more meaningful relation with these countries. So that's an opportunity we must use, and it means a lot of work, and it means we must share our work through our special envoys for the Foreign Office. All possible options of hybrid war have today to be exploited with equal intensity and balance, particularly those which our eastern neighbor is already providing us. Instead of using an approach which will be counterproductive, we should use the space being given to us by our adversary and is giving us huge spaces. We have to continue to divide their available military effort against us. We have to exhaust this military effort they have. And this is a long drawn battle, gentlemen. And with this, we have to continue giving support and sacrifice at our end with and without visibility for Kashmir cause. We also need to meet our adversary at all platforms with a changed tenor, a little more aggressive from what we think we are. We have to upscale that also. Gentlemen, this war will finally be lost within India because of their efforts. Thank you very much. Sir, thank you.
Thank you, General Shakil. I may just like to add that General Shakil was too successful as Director General Anti-Narcotics Force, and therefore he retired because there's too many people or too many politicians who had drug connections or too many politicians' connections who had drug this thing. So he was retired early, and therefore it is dangerous in Pakistan to be too successful in catching people accountability. Now, with that, I'm going to turn over to another consummate diplomat, a person whom I hold in the highest esteem. I have had many years knowing him, first in Nepal when he was ambassador there, and then of course for many years in Switzerland, where I was hosting various presidents and prime ministers of various regimes over the times, and he was the ambassador at that time. There was a person from PPP who was prime minister, Yusuf Zaghani. I was his host. Mia Nawaz Sharif was there. I was his host. And then, of course, Shahid Khan Abbasi. So I think I spent a lot of time with Ambassador Mir Akram. I saw him at close range. And I have the greatest respect for him. And I always said that, there's a quality that you see in our diplomatic corps is best symbolized by people like Ambassador Zamir Akram. Without further ado, I hand over to Ambassador Zamir Akram.
Thank you, Vikram Sahil Sahab, first of all, for those very kind words that you have spoken about me. And secondly, for inviting me to participate in this very important webinar on this question of Kashmir, which marks 1 year of the lockdown imposed by India in the occupied valley. The previous speakers, Dr. Bakai and General Shakil, have covered a lot of ground, and I will try and avoid repeating those areas that they have already covered. So let me, first of all, characterize in my view, the outcome or the consequences of what India has been doing in Indian occupied Kashmir and what it actually amounts to. And I think that it is not just in terms of violations of human rights or humanitarian crises, but first and foremost, I think that their actions have led or are creating conditions for ethnic cleansing, because in addition to the revocation of Article 370, they have also revoked the citizenship rules and laws relating to Indian occupied Kashmir, whereby non-Kashmiris can acquire Kashmiri citizenship or Kashmiri rights to buy Kashmiri property. This is the most insidious means of trying to overtake or undermine the Muslim majority of occupied Kashmir by inducing people from the rest of India to come into occupied Kashmir, buy property, gain citizenship, and in the end, there is the objective, in the end, leading towards turning the Muslim majority in Kashmir into a minority. this would be something that the Americans did to the Native Americans. This is something that the Israeli governments are trying to do in occupied Palestine. And this is a playbook. The Israeli playbook is something that which Mr. Modi is implementing in Indian occupied Kashmir. So the first thing is ethnic cleansing. The second is the level and manner in which the Indian army, 900,000 people, who have been in force in this occupied valley, particularly in the Jammu region, particularly in the Jhelum region, sorry, ever since 1990, when the Kashmiri uprising started. These troops, paramilitary forces, the military, have engaged in a systematic imposition of genocide. What they have been doing in terms as a result of the arms control, as a result of the Armed Forces Act and other legal means that have been given to them, the legal cover that has been given to them, has been the deliberate violation of human rights, using rape as a means of, as an instrument of policy, of killing innocent people in so-called encounters, in prisons, which can be called as extrajudicial killings. These, taken together, violate the Genocide Convention. And this is something that we need to highlight in the international community. Then the third, because of this genocide, the Indian forces have been guilty of war crimes. This kind of treatment of prisoners, the kind of treatment of people taken into custody, even those that are demonstrating on the streets, including children who have been tied to vehicles, military vehicles, and dragged around the streets, where shotguns are used in close proximity, in close range, to shoot at people in their face, to destroy their eyesight, including for children and women and children. These all amount to war crimes. And this is something, again, that the Indian state is guilty of in Kashmir. And then there is, in my view, state-sponsored terrorism against the Kashmiris. We talk a lot about terrorism against states, but not by states against individuals or against a community. And that is precisely what the Indian government has been doing for years in occupied Kashmir. It has unleashed its state terrorism through its agents that are in the pay of the Indian government. The so-called Sarkari militants, as they are called, are no one else than paid, hired assassins of the Indian government that have gone around killing innocent people. And Dr. Bakai talked about the assassinations and killings of the leaderships and in the past and continuing. These were the people who were doing this. You remember the incident of Chhattis Singh Pura when Sikhs were massacred on the eve of Bill Clinton's visit to India. This was a deliberate terrorist attack to put the blame on the Kashmiri struggle, to demonize the Kashmiri struggle and to implicate Pakistan in such a heinous terrorist act. Later, it has been proved to have been a terrorist attack that was carried out at the behest of the Indian state. So these are the clear-cut issues on which we need to hold India accountable. And we need to take them and hold them accountable in international fora, such as the International Court of Justice, such as the International Criminal Court, the Human Rights Council, the Council of Europe, the European Union, as well as other parliaments across the world. And this is something that Pakistan has done, and because the Kashmiri diaspora is also engaged in, but this needs to be done in a much more organized and a much more sustained and concentrated effort along the 4 issues that I have identified. Now, what has India gained from this? I think that Prime Minister Modi has actually shot himself in both his feet. His policy in Kashmir has backfired, and this is obviously very clear now, 1 year after the lockdown. For one thing, there is total alienation among the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Even those like Sheikh Abdullah and Mehbooba Mufti and the others, Ghulam Nabi Azad, and those who were pro-Indian at one point of time, had to be imprisoned because their loyalty could not be counted on anymore by the Indian state. And so the alienation of the Kashmiri is complete. It's not just the leaders of the Hurriyat, but it's the leadership across the board. And you could be hard-pressed to find any Kashmiri today who can speak in favor of India and Indian rule in Kashmir. So that's the first thing that's happened. The second thing that's happened is that despite the use of excessive force and violence, repression, the Indian state has failed to intimidate the Kashmiri people because their struggle has grown. It has not diminished, and it has become widespread. And so that is why they have had to increase the number of their troops inside Indian occupied Kashmir. So this is another factor which points to the failure of Mr. Modi's policy. Third, it has brought international focus on the issue of Kashmir. Nothing that Pakistan could have done would have worked as well as India's own mistakes in Kashmir, which have brought about this international focus on what is happening in the occupied valley. Indians, as we saw in February of last year, were also unable to intimidate Pakistan. After the attack in Pulwama, the Indians crossed the border and bombed places in Balakot in Pakistan. Pakistan responded in kind, and then the Indians discovered that Pakistan was determined to take the necessary steps to defend its sovereignty and territorial integrity. It was then that the Indians started to de-escalate. So they have learned a lesson that if they are trying to bring about a new normal by which any development in Kashmir can lead the Indians to attack anywhere along the border or the ceasefire line or the line of control, then there will be a definite Pakistani response. And so this has been a sobering effect, has had a sobering effect, despite the propaganda that Mr. Modi used, but this has been a sobering effect on the Indians. Then again, the Indians have been taught a very clear lesson by the Chinese in Ladakh in the recent crisis. What has happened as a result of the confrontation with the Chinese is that now India is confronted virtually from Jammu along the line of control all the way up to the Karakoram Pass near Siachen and onwards along the line of actual control with China throughout Aksai Chin in Ladakh. This arc puts Indian occupied Kashmir into a three-tiered encirclement. The only tier is the southern tier, where the Indians are present and can supply through to their mainland. But along this entire region, this line of control to line of actual control, the Indians are facing a front that is with both Pakistan and with China. And that is the worst case scenario for the Indians when they have talked about fighting a two-front or two-and-a-half-front war, because the half of that front is, of course, the Kashmiri uprising. And as we discovered, because of the de-escalation that has taken place by India with Pakistan and with China, it demonstrates that India is not ready and not capable of fighting this so-called 2.5 front wars. And finally, on this issue, today there are not 3 parties to the Kashmir dispute. It's not just Kashmiris, Pakistan and India, but now there are 4 parties and the 4th party is China. And it is because of that that China has twice taken the Kashmir issue to the UN Security Council, and it has rejected the Indian revocation of Article 370 and the imposition of and the division of Kashmir into federally administered territories of Kashmir and Ladakh. So the Chinese are now a clear party to this problem, and that is a development that cannot and does not work in India's favor. And to conclude, let me say a few words about dialogue, because there is a lot that is said in Pakistan, and the Prime Minister yesterday also mentioned that there is no other solution but dialogue to end the Kashmir dispute, which is true, because war is not an option between 2 or 3 nuclear powers that are in the game at this time. But at the same time, we have to be realistic. There can be no dialogue with Mr. Modi. He is a Hindu fascist whose agenda is very different from trying to find solutions to problems with neighbors. In fact, he is adding to those problems. So as long as Mr. Modi is around, there is no question of any dialogue, and we should not be repeating and asking for this kind of dialogue. I think that also realistically in the present environment of the new Cold War, there is no possibility of any kind of mediation that can help to resolve the Kashmir problem. I do not see any meaningful mediation from the United States, because the United States sees India as an ally against China, and it is not going to undermine its interests with India in order to offer its mediation. Although Mr. Trump has talked about mediation, but I think this is only for optics. It is not a really serious offer. In any case, his offer is conditioned on the fact that if the Indians also agree, and he knows the Indians will never agree. So the mediation option for now is, I think, not a realistic option. We need to continue to highlight the Kashmir issue and the Kashmir struggle. We need to emphasize that this is a struggle that is legitimate. It is endorsed and condoned by the United Nations Charter, as well as United Nations resolutions, which recognize the right of people under foreign occupation and alien domination to wage a war for their freedom and self-determination. That is how this struggle needs to be projected. And the narrative of terrorism that has unfortunately been cast on it needs to be overcome. On the contrary, we should make every effort to project the Indian use of terrorism, not just in Kashmir, but also against Pakistan. Dr. Bakai mentioned this as well, that the incidents that took place recently in Karachi and the stock exchange attack, the attack on the Chinese consulate, these by the so-called Baloch Liberation Army. Who are the paymasters of the Baloch Liberation Army? There's no secret, because the Indian National Security Advisor, Mr. Duval, has stated publicly that he is willing and is engaged in supporting this kind of terrorism through separatist groups and elements. So this is the kind of track that we need to follow internationally by projecting the reality of this issue. And final word, and this is my personal view, I do not speak for any official organization or anything, but I think that the most important thing is that the Kashmiri struggle for self-determination needs to continue. And by that, I mean that struggle through the force of arms. This struggle is the most important struggle in order to keep the Kashmir issue alive. if the Kashmir struggle dies down for some reason, God forbid, then the Indians would have felt that they can get away with what they are doing. As long as the Kashmiri people continue to struggle, both politically and militarily, that hope for freedom will remain, and it will be the ultimate reason, the eventual factor that will convince the government of India in the future to find a solution to this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Zamir Akram. Very grateful for your very absolutely elaborate and lucid account of what's happening and what we should do. I have now a pleasure and privilege of introducing Barrister Anwar Mansoor Khan. Mr. Anwar Mansoor Khan has been the former Attorney General of Pakistan. He is not an unknown figure, and because in many cases, both inside the country and outside the country, he has successfully pleaded Pakistan's case. And I think it was only right that we should see not the Kashmir dispute, not only from the holistic point of view, but also from the point of view of the legal ramifications. And therefore, I request Anwar Mansoor Sahab, then I think what I'll do is that we've still got some technical glitches. So what I'd like to do is to Munir Akram Sahab. We have a message recorded from Ambassador Munir Akram from the United Nations, and we would like to play this message for this audience. Okay. Play kare. Sound. मेरी वीडियो आ रही, साउंड की नहीं आ रही, साउंड नहीं आ रही, साउंड नहीं आ रही. नहीं, नहीं, no, hold on. Stop करें. I'm sorry, we don't seem to have technical glitches as yet. So while we wait, please let me tell you that this is one of the problems that we face when we face recorded messages, that there seems to be a double sound coming, and we've not been able to sort of overcome this. Now, what we're doing is we're going back away from technology, back to the good old handheld. So we can just wait for 20 seconds and at the moment, I'm just trying to think about, the phrase that I used that Dr. Mabakai talked about, Kashmiri lives also matter. This is a catchword in the Western thing. That no comparison to the amount of lives lost by Kashmir. But I think we may now have come to a place where I think Mr. Anwar Mansoor is ready. So over to Mr. Anwar Mansoor.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Today, a very important day in relation to Kashmir. The manner in which Kashmir got its unfortunate issue in India as to how it has been made a union of India and how things have proceeded. But before I go into that, it is important for me to tell you as to what is the true issue behind the whole problem that India thinks it is facing. Everyone recalls the famous resolution of the United Nations Security Council. That is the resolution number 47 of 1948. This resolution was a very crucial resolution. Not only was it crucial, but there was a meaning behind this resolution. I would only read a few lines of this resolution because it is very important that we understand how and why this resolution was brought about. It says, having considered the complaint of the government of India, that is, the government of India actually complained against Pakistan after or during the war with India. And what it was, India's concern, the dispute over the state of Jammu and Kashmir. And having heard the representative of India, and in support of that complaint and the reply of Pakistan, there were certain very important aspects that were brought about. The most important thing that was brought about was the restoration of peace in Kashmir. And it was then that the United Nations Security Council required the government of India to do numerous things. I will only read one of them. And it says, when the Indian forces have been reduced to the minimum strength in above, arrange the consultation with the Commission for stationing the remaining forces to be carried out in accordance with the following principles: that the presence of troops should not afford any intimidation or appearance of intimidation to the inhabitants of the state. That a small number as possible should be retained in the forward area, that any reserve of troops which may be included in the total strength should be located within their present base area. That is, the Indian Army was required to be moved out of Kashmir. And not only was it required to move out of Kashmir, but it was required to keep away from the locals, namely the Kashmiris. Now, this is a very, very crucial aspect. Probably very few know that there have been 21 different resolutions in relation to Kashmir. Naturally, all of them reflecting a plebiscite to be carried out. All of them requiring the persons, namely the Kashmiris, to be protected as, in accordance with the international laws, they are protected persons. Now, why do I say that? There is a very crucial document that is usually not brought about or even referred to, is the fourth convention, that is usually known as the Geneva Convention, wherein the relative to the protection of civilian persons in the time of war was required to be maintained. Now, in this, a very important aspect was brought about, and that was Article 3 of this convention said that in case of an armed conflict, not of an international character, occurring in the territory of one of the high contracting parties, each party to the conflict shall be bound to apply as a minimum the following proposition. Persons taking no active part in the hostilities, including the members of the armed forces, who have laid down their arms and placed the hors de combat by sickness, wound, detention, or other causes, shall in circumstances be treated humanly, without any adverse distinction, founded on race, color, religion, or faith, sex, birth, or wealth, or any other similar criteria. This further went on to name what we call the protected person. And it says a person protected by this convention are those who are given moment and in any manner whatsoever find themselves in a case of conflict and occupation. Now, India has actually occupied Kashmir, and that is why we call it an Indian occupied Kashmir. Now, it is also important to note that under Article 32 of this very convention, the high contracting parties specially agree with each of them is prohibited from taking any measures of such character as to cause the physical suffering or extermination of protected persons in their hand. This prohibition applies not only to murder, torture, corporal punishment, mutilation, and medical or scientific experiments not necessitated by medical treatment of protected persons, but also to any measure, and this is important, to any other measure of brutality, whether applied by civilian or by military agents. Now, keeping this in mind, in the occupied area, the United Nations, the Charter of the United Nations, I would refer to various provisions which are very important. Chapter 7 of the Charter, Article 39 onwards, very clearly requires the Security Council to take appropriate action. And I'll read. The Security Council should determine the existence of any threat to peace, breach of peace, or act of aggression, and shall make recommendations to decide what measures shall be taken in account in accordance with Articles 41 and 42. Then Article 40 says, in order to prevent an aggravation in the situation, the Security Council may, before making recommendations or deciding upon the measures provided for in Article 39, call upon the parties concerned to comply with such provisions, measures as it deems necessary or desirable. And then 41 and 42 require that should the Security Council consider that measures provided in Article 41 should be inadequate or have proved to be inadequate, it may take such action by air, sea, or land forces as may be necessary to maintain or restore international peace and security. Such action may include demonstrations, blockades, and other operations by air, sea, or land of members of the United Nations. Now, what is the situation all about? The situation today is that India in violation of every resolution there. Every resolution means the resolution 47 of 1948, resolution number 91 and 96 of 1951, resolution 98 of 1952, resolutions 122, 123, and 126 of 1957, resolution 209, 2010, 211, 214, and 15 of 1965, and finally resolutions 303 and 307 of 1971. All these resolutions require that plebiscite be carried out, and that those protected persons should there be protected against all inhuman actions. That is, Kashmir was a disputed territory and continues to be a disputed territory. Kashmir was occupied, and that is why the resolution 47 of 1948 came about, and it was on India's request and complaint. Once it was on India's request and complaint, naturally they were bound to follow every part of that resolution and subsequent resolutions. They were required to protect, and instead, India has mounted over 600,000 military personnel, police, and other armed personnel in Kashmir. The most important part is that they were required to remove all armed personnel from Kashmir, which they did not. They were required to create an atmosphere where the plebiscite could be arranged. They were bound not to change the character of Kashmir, which they are in the process of doing. They made Kashmir and Jammu unions of the state of India. That means forcibly annexing Kashmir, which the resolutions categorically bar them from doing. Unfortunately, the Security Council chooses not to act under its own charter. The charter being, which I just read, 39, 40, 41, and 42 of Chapter 7, which categorically requires that where there is a breach of peace, they will interfere and intervene. And if such a situation comes about, where by such simple intervention, they are unable to resolve the issue, then they can, by air, sea, or land, use force to stop any action which is contrary to international law. It is upon Pakistan and the government of Pakistan to proceed and cause the Security Council to take appropriate action, an action taken in accordance with the United Nations Security Council resolutions and its charter. And in not doing so, we probably are not pushing enough. I may add here that no doubt the government of Pakistan, especially the Prime Minister of Pakistan, has gone into, and probably the first time when the Kashmir issue was raised in the National Assembly, National Assembly of the United Nations. And it was very forcibly done, but no resolution, no action unfortunately seems to have been taken. Let me go further on this. The Human Rights Commission is required to act, and they are required to act under the Geneva Convention again. The United Nations Human Rights Watch has again not said anything which we need to proceed with. The law is apparent, the law is sufficient, and we can go and proceed. At least try to convince the people, the members of the United Nations, to proceed in accordance with the mandate of the United Nations Charter. Now, keeping this in view, I would say that the United Nations has been given sufficient notice. The United Nations took up the matter, but without resolving the issue, they concluded. I would here say that we need to move very strongly and move the various member states individually so that a resolution against India could be brought about in the United Nations. Thank you.
Thank you, Anand Mansur Saab. Obviously, a very, very detailed view about the legal ramifications, and we are very grateful to you. Only you could have really done this in such great detail, and we really that's it. Now, before I introduce the next guest, who has just joined us actually from leading a rally, this उनका off कर दें, उनका video off कर दें, leading a rally, and actually he was being very instrumental in organizing the business community throughout Karachi, and with the result that this rally, which started in the Clifton area, was also addressed by the governor, and Haji Rafiq Pardesi is coming directly from there. He was not present when the President Azad Jammu and Kashmir said very kind words about him, because he also invited him to lead a business delegation to Kashmir. And Haji Rafiq Pardesi is a well-known business figure, an industrial figure in Pakistan, has been for many years abroad, and now come back to Pakistan and is really, really investing in Pakistan in a great way. So I have, please, in the meantime, I want to request Haji Saab to please go ahead and speak. Sure, don't worry about it. Leave it. Still some time because there's some technical glitch there, so please bear with us. This seems to be bedeviling us today, and things are not happening. So if things are ready now, can we? Is it ready? Please go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead. आप छोड़ देना. Our technical people are playing sixes and sevens with us today. They're all over the place. They can't seem to understand that we need. Haji Saab, with further, can you please go ahead? आवाज आ रही? Mic. Mic.
Yes. Today we had a very good rally in Karachi, and the governor of Sindh was present there also. Thousands of people were there also. Alhamdulillah, lots of people from the business community, from universities, from different parts of the community, they were present there, and everybody has given a very good speeches and messages to the world that now something has to do for Kashmir. Lots of time we have passed just for nothing. 1 year has passed. The people are suffering. Already 1 year has lost. Now the future is winter. And in Kashmir, the winter is very bad. So I don't know what is going to be happening in Kashmir now. If you don't wake up, if you don't do anything, if you don't support them, how can they will survive? Is a big question mark for me. But at least all over the world, everybody from the world, every human being should support this cause. And inshallah ta'ala, we will support from Pakistan side, from Karachi side. Pakistanis are ready to support at any stage now. I have discussed with about Kashmir matter with lots of people, and everybody is saying like, Haji Sahab, we are ready to support you. Wherever you want to go, you just do it. Just tell me what we have to do. Anwar Masood Sahab and our team has made a very good petition just to submit in United Nations. Very soon we are going there with your support, with your advice. And inshallah, we will see that this United Nations people, we have to wake them up, let them go to India and discuss all these matters with these people, or whatever legally they have to do, we will force them to do it. The second step, we will just go to OIC and we will tell them that this OIC made for Muslim Ummah, for the problems of Muslim, for the benefit of the Muslim. So what these people they are doing since 1 year, lots of problem in Kashmir, lots of problem for the humanity. There are not only Muslims are there. I think 68–70% Muslims are there, but rest are Sikhs are there, Hindus are there. Everybody is suffering. So how can people survive in this world? If these things will be happen in everywhere in the world, then there will be no law, no humanity, no peace. How can the people will live? And whatever this Modi or his government or his some RSS people they are doing with the humanity is very bad. They are creating a new dates or something new which has not happened in the last many years in this world. So either they have to take some proper decision, or either the world has to change these people. If these people will not be changed and these things will be go on, carry on like this, I think it will be a big problem for India also, this Indian people also, Indian community also, because they are in all over the world. So people they don't like now. We just take the example of New York just yesterday. They have accepted the logo of Kashmir, but they didn't accept to do anything about Ram Mandir, what they are going next to Babri Masjid. So these are the signs that people are not accepting them now. So if these things will be run, one day it will be a big problem or a big disaster for whole India. And India is our neighbor also, so it's a big disaster for them. Definitely we will get some bad things also here also. So now the time has come, everybody should wake up. Just tell India, just tell Ms. Modi that this is not the right way what you are doing. Please correct yourself. Bring some human beings over there. So these people, they just focus on the right way, right things, and the things will move very, very positive. In India, everybody knows that a big community of Muslims over there. They are giving big problems for them also. So once they will succeed in Kashmir, the second step is India. Third step is the neighboring countries. So please, everybody should do something now. Start to do something now. If we will not do anything, the day is coming that we will see all over the world big problems, big disasters. And unfortunately, both India and Pakistan are atomic powers now. So if the things go beyond the limit, then who's responsible? So please, my request to all my brothers, my sisters, all my colleagues, my members, please, we have to do something. We are human beings. We have to look for the humanity, and then we have to look for our Muslim brothers also. Inshallah, we are working day and night, and we will do all the work day and night. I am committed to this cause, and I will not stop. My team will not stop. We will do work day and night to solve this problem, inshallah, very soon. Thank you very much. And once again, thank you very much for inviting the President of Azad Kashmir. Inshallah, very soon we will come with our team, with our members, and we will come and meet you, and we will discuss in detail what the way forward will be for the Kashmir cause, inshallah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Haji Sahab. Thank you for your very kind words and your address on this webinar. First of all, let me apologize profusely for all the technical glitches. We, of course, were not ready to play recordings, and unfortunately, there was double sounds, and we thought it best to delay that. And what we are going to do is immediately after the conclusion of this webinar, we are going to put it up on the YouTube with the recording of the President's message and the question and answer session which followed with him. And hopefully that will be in the next few hours be uploaded onto the YouTube and various other channels. Now, I think both the President's speech, which you will get to see in a couple of hours, and the question and answers that the questions that were posed to him and the answers that he gave, and each of the speakers really went to great lengths and explained the position that we are in as far as Kashmir is concerned, the position this region is concerned, the dangers that we face, and the necessary steps that we must take. I think the crux of the problem is, and I do take into account Dr. Huma Bakai saying that have strategic restraint, right? But at the same time, I think the consensus is to have offensive diplomacy, not engaging into conflict, but at least, like General Shakil said, that we can, talk to them, but we must make sure that while we talk to them, they must feel that there is strength behind what we talk to them. Otherwise, the Indians are never going to listen to us. That has been proved over 28 years, not only 28 years, but over 38 years, and also really right back to 1947. So I think whereas the right route to go is to engage and talk to each other, but the doors have been shut to us, and the red lines that we've been talking about have been crossed so often, and so many red lines have been crossed that it has left us with very few options in the meantime. So first of all, let me thank each speaker, starting with the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir. He spoke very well, very fluently, with conviction. And then each of the speakers, which included, Dr. Huma Bakai and Ambassador Zamir Akram, and in fact, Minister Anwar Mansoor, and also in the end, Haji Rafiq Pardesi. And yes, we are going to take up the notation by the President of Azad Jammu and Kashmir, and we will see as businessmen and industrialists what measures we can take to strengthen Kashmir economically, because it is only through strengthening them economic means that we will give them the wherewithal to at least stand up on their feet in a better way than is being done now all throughout Kashmir. So thank you very much. I'm very grateful to all the participants. I'm very grateful to all those from the Americas who have woken up early in the morning, from Asia, East Asia, which at the moment now coming to late evening. So thank you all very much. And with that, I call this webinar to a close. Thank you all.